Good morning. It's Wednesday, April 5th. It is day 31 of Lent. It's official. We're in the last quarter of Lent. Holy Week is coming up, and I'm happy to have you with me today. Father Patrick from St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Manhattan, Kansas. We're in chapter 13 of Romans, which is subdivided into three different sections, and today we're in the second section, which is Romans 13, 8 through 10. Just three verses, but powerful verses. Remember that yesterday we talked about being subject to the authorities, specifically the Roman state, Paul's thoughts on that. And remember, as we read this, that Paul says that the authorities are those to whom we owe taxes, and that authority does not bear the sword in vain. In other words, that authority is indeed a violent thing, and we need to watch out for them, and honor them and respect them. So Romans 13, 8 through 10. My Bible calls it love for one another. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Remember yesterday that we talked about how it's possible that this section is about our relationship with the Jewish Christian, the Jews, and Jewish Christians, obviously. And so it's possible that when he's talking about here previously he'd been talking about owing taxes to the state, how we need to pay those, but here he jumps in and he says, listen, but we're not supposed to owe one another anything, except that we love one another. And then he goes and he takes these Jewish commandments, four of them, which are familiar to us: adultery, murder, stealing, and coveting. Don't do any of those things. And says, listen, that's all summed up in one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. Recall that Jesus did something very similar to this when he was asked by the publican, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, which is the Shema, and love your neighbor as yourself. So Paul is probably echoing some Jesus tradition here. The use of the word neighbor for Christians connotes one another, but also other Christians, but also Jews and Gentiles as well. So our relationship with the state is one thing, but our relationship with each other is another thing, and we're not supposed to owe each other anything or to keep each other in debt, and we're supposed to love one another. The Greek word for the day, there's another one that you've probably heard, is the word for love, agape, or agape, as the accent is placed. Agape is the word that is used throughout the New Testament to describe the love that God has for us. When God is described as being love, God is agape, theos is agape, and so that's a powerful word. It's the kind of love that God has for us, the kind of unconditional love that God has for us. So that's the thought for the day as well. How are you practicing agape? The unbounded love that God has for you. How are you communicating that to the world around you? And how are you seeking to sum up your whole life in the words, love your neighbor as yourself? They're Jesus' words, but they're Paul's words as well, and certainly they're God's words, and a strong and powerful commandment to us anyway. So we'll finish chapter 13 tomorrow. Have a happy and a holy Lent. Thanks for joining.